From Commodore 64s to commanding the cyber world, Bryce Austin has spent a lifetime in the trenches of the tech security revolution. Bryce is the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, for many companies, including one listed on the S&P 500. He is the author of the book Secure Enough, 20 Questions on Cybersecurity for Business Owners and Executives. And as an internationally recognized cybersecurity speaker with over a decade of executive experience and hands-on knowledge, his number one goal is for you to learn how to lower your own cybersecurity risk to a level that is secure enough for you. When he's not educating audiences, you'll find him burning rubber on racetracks and coaching drivers. To this end, he's had over 100 students, and none of them have died while they've been under his watch. Here he is, Bryce Austin.
I was in the room when it happened. I was physically in the room. It was November 28th, 2013, and I was working my first ever Black Thursday at Target Corporation. We were going to be opening the stores at 3 p.m. in different time zones, and my team was responsible for managing the new technology programs that would touch the stores themselves, things that would change the team member experience, the customer experience. Some things were mundane, new Wi-Fi systems, new scales in the deli, but some were at the future of retail, things like buy online at Target.com and then pick up your merchandise in a store. That's called flexible fulfillment. Nowadays, many companies do it, but at the time, this was cutting edge stuff. And we were launching flexible fulfillment on Black Thursday, 2013. We left that day after having a successful launch, successful store openings, no significant technology issues, with high fives and pats on the back and the knowledge of a job well done, and me thinking I had a long and prosperous career at Target Corporation. Because we didn't know that in that room, while we were working, a switch had been flipped. It was a switch that began exfiltrating credit card numbers out of the Target cash registers at a rate of millions per hour. It was a switch that had been placed before I even started at the company, but we didn't know. Well, a couple of weeks later, when the FBI and the Secret Service came knocking on the door, then we knew. We had a much better idea after that. And a few days later, when Brian Krebs broke the story to the world, then everyone knew. I actually had a chance to meet him a number of years ago. We were both speaking at the same conference, and he talked about how he toiled in obscurity as a journalist until he broke the Target story, and then his world exploded. Funny, mine too. I can relate to that very directly, having your entire world explode after this news story came to light. Now, I wasn't in cybersecurity at the time. I had been for years and years prior in the financial services space, but I hadn't at Target. And when you're in the wake of what looks like $1 billion cybersecurity breach, how important are the new whiz-bang programs that will touch the stores themselves? They aren't important at all. I had a team of over 200, and I was able to save almost half of them to try to find them other spots in the company to continue to have a contribution. But over 100 people on that team and myself were part of the 2,000 people laid off in 2014, primarily as a result of the breach. And I didn't like it. I wasn't a fan. I went from bonus checks to unemployment checks, and I wanted to understand why. So I decided to dig into it, and I realized that the problems that we had were solvable. They just weren't understood by senior leaders at Target, so they didn't make the decisions in retrospect they should have to bring the cybersecurity risk to a level that would have been secure enough for the company. And they aren't alone. CNA Financial is one of the largest insurance companies on the planet, and they hold the ring for having paid the largest ransomware demand in the history of the world, $40 million paid by an insurance company that offers cybersecurity liability policies. So if I ever want my two kids to know the definition of irony, I just send them to one of these articles online and they can draw their own conclusions. But it isn't just a company problem. OPM stands for the Office of Personnel Management. This is the US government's HR department. They were hacked allegedly by the Chinese in 2015. And regrettably, this was likely a loss of life event because there were records in those databases of anyone that had received funds from the US government, including people that we may have been using in an espionage or spy capacity. And when those foreign governments know that someone on their side is working for us, that's how people disappear. Cybersecurity is very serious. It's an important issue, and we have a problem around it. And these problems have long, long tails. Even though this happened in 2015, the class action lawsuit about it was just settled several months ago. We have a problem. And the problem starts with people, process, and technology. I wanted to focus on the people. So I wrote a book called Secure Enough, 20 Questions on Cybersecurity for Business Owners and Executives. I encourage you to buy it often and in large quantity. In full transparency, a free e-copy of the book is normally something we offer to all audiences when I'm lucky enough to have the chance to present to them. And we have a large handful of these to pass out to audience members that ask good questions or VIPs or what have you. So let's talk a little bit about risk. What are the things that we can do with a risk? Not just cybersecurity, but any risk. There are three things. All of them are acceptable. One, I can understand a risk and say that risk is secure enough for me. I'm going to move forward. When I fly all around the globe, I do not inspect the airplanes myself. I allow the FAA and Delta to take care of that, and they haven't let me down yet. Granted, I haven't taken a flight out of Moscow recently, but that's a whole other story. The other thing that we can do is see a risk and say this is not acceptable as is. We need to lower it to a level where it is acceptable. After the fifth or sixth Uber ride that I took where the person was not driving in a way that I felt safe, I started renting more cars and mitigated that risk down. The third thing that we can do is we can transfer that risk to somebody else via an insurance policy, via an outsourcing agreement that includes the transfer of liability for whatever that product or service is. What I don't want anyone in your association to do is stick their head in the sand and hope that nothing bad happens. And that's where a lot of us are right now when it comes to cybersecurity, because it's not an easy problem to understand. What we need to do is to make ourselves difficult to attack. Not perfect, not bulletproof, but difficult. So how do we do that? In the land of squirrels, the porcupine has a significant competitive advantage. Now, I would love to go into more detail about this, but it's going to require a longer presentation. But what I will say is that even though squirrels can run faster, even though they reproduce more quickly, porcupines have a very good set of defenses that do make them secure enough in their environment. And if we can mimic that in our cybersecurity space, the hawks circling overhead will find a squirrel and they will leave us alone because we're more grief than we're worth. We can talk about who these people are that are cybercriminal actors. Who is it that we are trying to defend ourselves against? Because in order to defeat the opponent, you must understand the opponent. Well, these are them. And often we hear about nation state level attacks because they're exciting and because they're flashy. And we have the SolarWinds Orion breach and the MOVEit breach. That typically isn't who we're up against. We're up against organized crime. We're up against that second to the top tier. That's where 90% of our cybersecurity threats come from. And we can go through the different avenues that they use to try to hack your company. They will typically start with a phishing attack, trying to get credentials. They will hop from system to system, looking for something theftable or something they can encrypt and ransom. They will try to scrape data that is useful to them, either to resell, or if it's credit card numbers to commit fraud, or if it's confidential information on your employees to pretend to be them. They will aggregate that data somewhere in your system, and they will work hard to try to get it out. If we can stop any one of those steps, we can stop the breach. And talking about how to do that is one of the core areas of any presentation that I'm fortunate enough to give. Ransomware. I mentioned what a big deal it is. My company does a fair amount of incident response. We will walk through some real world scenarios about how ransomware propagates, how it starts, how we get involved, what companies look like after one of these events has taken place, systems that are up, systems that are down, how we engage law enforcement, how we engage insurance companies, how we engage executives. We will talk about what these ransom notes and demands look like. Most people haven't ever seen a ransomware note before. They're not overly glamorous, but this is an example of a real world one where the initial demand was $8 million. This was our initial conversations with the cybercriminals, but they were willing to give us a discount to $5 million if we paid within 7. Wasn't that nice of them? There is no honor among thieves. We will talk about how you get out of situations like this. Sometimes you have to pay, sometimes you don't. If you have to pay, does the decryptor work or not? Well, We're going to show people what it's like to live through this. This is an actual video of us doing a decryption on an encrypted machine. And I was rather stunned at just what good technology the cybercriminals are using. Those boxes you see flipping around, those are all different processors on the server. It has 8 processors and it's using them in parallel. I have clients with ERP systems that can't do that. Why can't we get these criminals to use their powers for the bright side of the force? We will talk about law enforcement. We will talk about government agencies that we can partner with to try to keep ourselves safer. The FBI is often a good partner in these, and we've had flash alerts come out of my company where the FBI and I partnered to try to make something more publicly known so other people don't fall victim. Finally, we'll talk about remediation, the things that we can do to keep this from happening again if someone falls victim to it. But a lot of what I just talked about is reactive cybersecurity. How is it that you clean up after something has happened? What do you do after the milk has been spilled? Well, I like talking about proactive cybersecurity more, because proactive cybersecurity means you never had an event. It means you became a porcupine in a land of squirrels before things started. And as Ed was kind enough to mention, I am a weekend auto racer, started around the year 2000 and cut my teeth the way a lot of professionals do on the racetrack in 1994 Saturn. Please stop laughing. That's no good for my self-esteem. So after getting a real race car and moving on to things like endurance racing and sprint racing and such, had a lot of fun with it. And the physical security issues around the racetrack are well known. And we have problems. There are sometimes things you need to mitigate you didn't expect, like when you walk out of the trailer in the morning and your race car looks like that. Well, the race still goes on, and we didn't bring snow tires that day. So you have to figure out what to do. What we want to do with your audience is to show them some of the real world physical risks of auto racing and make parallels to the cyber risks that we see in front of us every day. They just aren't as obvious. We're going to go through actual on-track racing videos of near misses like this and the things that we're seeing that led up to this event, and how if you make the right moves, even doing a high-risk maneuver like taking your car off track is still the lowest risk thing you can do. And even though we lost several seconds, we lived to fight another day. We are going to talk about other videos where things weren't as obvious and they didn't make as much sense. And the reaction was not as good. Sometimes we still have to play the reactive game, but a proactive response beats a reactive one every single time. And we will bring those things to life in a larger presentation. These things are critical to me because cybersecurity changed the ability for me to feed my family. I am thrilled and honored to have the opportunity to speak with you about some of the things that we can do to make sure that your associations stay secure enough. My name is Bryce Austin. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I appreciate it.